What happens when you practice the guitar blindfolded for 30 days straight? Let's find out. I'm David Harsh with Guitar Success for You, and as a worship leader and performer, I know that there are multiple reasons not to stare at my guitar the whole time. So, I set out to completely take away the visual element. I'm going to practice every one of these 30 days for 30 minutes with a blindfold on. But it gets better. I'm not going to shave my face for 30 days either, so you can see the visual progression as I become a bearded guitarist. I haven't grown my beard out in years, so why not? Okay, here we go. Before we continue, I've got a beard now, which means everything I'm going to share with you today is from the perspective of someone who has completed this 30-day challenge. I'm excited to talk about what I learned, what I was surprised by, and the things I got better at as I practiced. I encourage you to watch the entire video because I've gathered over 24 takeaways that I'm going to sprinkle throughout this recap. Some of them may affirm what you already know, but several of them were breakthroughs for me, so they may turn out to be gold for you as they inspire and empower you as a guitarist and musician. Whether you're a beginner or an intermediate guitarist, I'm confident you will learn some valuable things today. No guitar required, by the way, just your eyes and ears. As I put this experiment together, my plan was to keep these 3 constants. First, I used the same guitar every time, my Taylor 810. Second, I practiced for 30 minutes a day. Lastly, I practiced seated. I set up my phone for each practice session, hit record, and put on a blindfold. I had 3 different blindfolds, red, blue, and yellow, and I rotated between them. This helped me keep track of which day was captured on video because I saved each daily slice of time in one folder so I could edit them all down into the video you're watching. One thing that was absolutely necessary, as you might imagine, was that I had to play concepts that I had memorized. So I worked on elements that I knew already, but many of which historically I had to look at my guitar to play accurately. That changed over the course of this experiment. On day 1, you'll see here that I had no beard at all because I was just getting started. I got my fingers moving with some minor pentatonic scales up the neck. I worked through the cycle of fourths from open position to the 10th fret, and then I went on to play all the octaves up the neck in all keys, like this. As you may know, every key has 6 appearances of a note every 12 frets. I did a little review of a worship song I've been preparing for an upcoming Sunday, so it was good to not only start with technique, but to finish with repertoire. Here's my day 1 takeaway. Playing blindfolded feels a bit weird, but it's already helping. Day 2 involved playing octaves up and down the neck in all 12 keys. Descending was much harder to do strictly by feel, but I started to get more and more comfortable with the positions. One thing I discovered with this blindfold experiment was that the distances between the lower frets feels very different compared to the higher frets. I mean, I probably would have anticipated that, but I could really feel it with the blindfold on. Day 2 takeaway? I know my fretboard better than I thought I did. For day 3, I decided to practice outside in my backyard. It was a glorious, mild evening, and I enjoyed hearing the sounds of birds and neighboring dogs in the distance. It heightened my hearing and gave me a bit of an opportunity to listen more closely to my guitar playing and to really focus. I played all the diatonic chords in all major keys around the circle of fifths, but some of the keys, like D flat major or C sharp major if you prefer, were really tricky with so many bar chords. As you may know, the key of G major with 1 sharp has the chords G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, F sharp diminished, and we can come back to G. 5 out of those 7 chords are open, which makes the key of G major very accessible. However, if we jump across the circle to the key of A flat major, we have 4 flats, and the chords are A flat, B flat minor, C minor, D flat major, E flat major, F minor, G diminished, and we can come back around to A flat major. None of those chords are open. That presents more of a challenge. So I was able to slowly and steadily work my way through all of these major keys and their corresponding diatonic chords blindfolded. Day 3 takeaway, flat keys involve a lot more bar chords and some larger leaps. For day 4, I broke out the metronome, turned it to 92 beats per minute, and used it to guide myself through multiple major scale forms using ascending and descending melodic figures with thirds, starting with the key of G. It occurred to me on this day that I didn't have to have the lights on, so I turned them off. But then a funny thing happened. My family couldn't find me because it didn't occur to them that I might be practicing in a dark office and I hadn't told them. Now, for our purposes here, to keep this a bit more visually accessible and less grainy on the video resolution, I'll keep the lights on for the rest of this documentation, but it's just good to know that I can save electricity by practicing in the dark. Also, since I don't have perfect pitch, but I do have relative pitch, I decided to put my hearing to the test and played a game I made up called Drop the Needle. You know, like on a turntable. I just played random notes and tried to identify them by ear based on their intervallic relationship to open notes and notes in first position that I knew. So, like for example, if I play, I don't know, this note, I can sense what it is because I know this note is D, but of course, the next note up would be D sharp, which is E flat, the note that I just played. And of course I did this with a blindfold on multiple times, and I got better and better at it. Day 4 takeaway, practicing in the dark really helps. For day 5, I slowed down my metronome to 69 beats per minute and finished up the scalar thirds, which got tricky with some position changes. I also chose to practice before 8 a.m. because I had a lot going on that day and I wanted to be sure I kept my routine going. It was hard though because I had had a really late night the night before, so with some sleep shortage, I had difficulty focusing. Also, the 30-minute timer on my phone went off when I was in the middle of a scale exercise, and I wanted to finish it, so I pressed on and kept playing even with this very distracting, persistent noise. It was another great exercise in concentration. Here's my day 5 takeaway. Get better sleep before practicing. For day 6, I woke up and basically did not want to practice. But because I knew that the results I wanted were waiting on the other side of this practice routine, I went ahead and practiced, and I'm glad I did. I'll also add that as the weather has been getting colder, I had to turn up the heat in my office to make my practice session more enjoyable and attainable. I did more scalar thirds at 69 beats per minute, and then did some intricate fingerstyle guitar work. Day 6 takeaway, practice even when you don't want to, so you can get the results you want. Now, for day 7, I was on site to volunteer at our daughter's school for their choirs, so I needed to take my practice experience on the road. I brought my guitar, my phone stand, and of course my blindfold. The headmaster's old office is relatively unoccupied, so that turned out to be a great makeshift practice space as I leveraged a drop D tuning combined with a partial capo for some really pretty sounds. It was a bit less cerebral, but still quite technical for my picking hand, and I enjoyed incorporating some artistry with fingerstyle. It took some good focus and was serious fun to play. Day 7 takeaway? It's good to be flexible with where you practice. For day 8, it was another beautiful day, so I sat outside and got some fresh air. With 1 week on the books, I decided to dig into major triads in all positions, up and down the frets, and across the strings and back. For example, here are the triads in B flat major up and down the frets. And here they are across the strings and back. These were a bit tricky, but since the shapes for each set of strings stays the same as we move through the keys, all it takes is getting settled into the next key and they rotate through the sequences. Day 8 takeaway? Picking hand accuracy is just as important as fretting hand accuracy. For day 9, I did a bunch of major triads and recognized more patterns as I worked them in 7 keys. Moving with triads up and down the strings as opposed to across the strings turned out to be much more difficult because I was moving by leap with totally changing shapes. Day 9 takeaway, never be shy about discovering patterns on the fretboard. On day 10, I finished all the major triads. I could feel myself getting stronger and faster already. Then it was time to start the minor triads. Certain keys were easier to access than others, but the patterns kept moving up the neck. So, for example, here are the B-flat minor triads up and down the neck. And here they are across the strings and back. It was a later night, and I could feel my concentration waning and my accuracy slipping. My day 10 takeaway is this: maybe practice before going into a social evening activity. On day 11, I continued with minor triads and became even more familiar with how the shapes could transfer across the strings, except between strings 3 and 2, which affected strings 3, 2, and 1 because of the non-symmetrical tuning. Watch how these two minor triad shapes, based on strings 6, 5, and 4, and 5, 4, and 3, look the same. But then these two minor triad shapes, based on strings 4, 3, and 2, and then 3, 2, and 1, are not at all the same, right? Now, if I had tuned my guitar uniformly in perfect fourths, which some guitarists actually do, the shapes would have all been identical across the strings. Day 11 takeaway: don't try to reinvent the wheel. Let the patterns you discover work for you. On day 12, I was all dressed up from church, so as soon as I got home, I just walked into my studio and sat down to crank out my 30-minute practice session. I worked the minor triads, but I lost track of which key I was in, so I took a rabbit trail down a set of minor triads I had already gone over yesterday. But I found my way back. Because more and more people were noticing my beard, it had started conversations that led to the explanation of my plan, which in turn created accountability. Now that people knew what I was up to, I didn't want to break my streak, so I was really motivated to stay on top of my regimen. Day 12 takeaway: shared goals create more traction. Day 13 involved finishing up the minor triads. I had the house to myself for several hours while my family was on an outing, so I made myself comfortable in our front room after dinner. I continued to increase my speed and accuracy. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock, which of course was at 60 beats per minute, but I kept my focus and kept on playing. Day 13 takeaway: build in time and space for solo practice margin. Days 14 and 15 involved playing all the chords in major keys up and down the neck with the caged system, leveraging the glider capo. I played through all 12 keys, starting with the key of C major. The next day, on day 15, I began with capo 1 G shapes for the key of A flat major, and I of course made my way back down in descending fashion. As you may know, the caged cycle starts with each C chord found on a different shape. Check this out. All 5 of those capo positions and shapes allow for C major chords. And of course, I played all the diatonic chords in all 12 major keys using this approach. Playing this in the blind was super helpful to my process. The glider capo made things that much more accessible. In addition to being able to store it gently behind the nut, you can move the glider capo with your strumming or picking hand, or let the thumb of your fretting hand move it along from behind the neck. It's pretty cool. Feel free to check out the link in the description below if you want to purchase your own glider capo. Days 14 and 15 takeaway: the capo is your buddy and can lead to quick and smooth access to multiple keys. We're halfway there. Now remember, you don't have to understand everything I've been talking about. If you do, great. But hey, my hope is that you can see the variety of memorized tasks I've embarked on, and also my improvement, and perhaps also my very stylish beard. Okay, let's continue. For day 16, I embarked on all 5 natural minor scale forms, also known as the Aeolian mode. These are the same forms as the major scales, but they have a different tonal center based on the 6th degree of the major scale. Day 16 takeaway: it's trickier to start on the minor 6th degree, but if you linger on it to get your bearings, it can really help. Day 17 started out with me tuning my guitar by ear, for which I used the equal temperament method I learned about 30 years ago from Gerald Klickstein's book, Tuning the Guitar by Ear. This process involves tuning the A string from a reliable source like a piano or a tuning fork, and then using harmonics and fretted notes to tune and test all remaining 5 strings to that A. Tuning in the blind is tricky, but as long as you have a starting reference point of A440, you can make it happen. It just takes longer. I finished the Aeolian mode forms and wrapped up with 2 worship songs I've been preparing memorized. Day 17 takeaway: tuning well takes time and focus, but it's worth it. On day 18, I took a break from technique to run multiple worship songs I've been memorizing for an upcoming Sunday I'll be leading for. One of them was in 12/8, or since it's music theory and not music fact, 4/4 time with triplets for every beat. It was a good reminder for me to discover the value of working on tricky strumming patterns, especially without looking at the guitar, and it was also good to confirm that I had completely memorized the song forms. Day 18 takeaway: having a song completely memorized is excellent because you don't have to rely on anything visual. For days 19 and 20, I started out by enjoying another practice session in my backyard, warming up with the cycle of fourths up the neck, and then I dove into the Dorian mode in all 5 scale forms. These are the same forms as the major scale and the natural minor scale, but they start on the 2nd degree of the major scale, as you may know. So, for example, this is the A major scale, or the A Ionian mode. Then we have the B Dorian mode. Same notes, just a different tonal center. I continued locking in the Dorian mode on day 20 as I again practiced here in my studio, finishing out the positions. The Dorian mode is my favorite of all 7 modes, so this was especially enjoyable. Days 19 and 20 takeaway: linger on the home note of a mode to orientate yourself. Well, I'd say this is going rather well. Wouldn't you? Have you learned some things from my process so far? I'm hoping that my 30-day experiment is providing some value to you, and hey, you only need to spend a few minutes to learn what it took me 15 hours to discover, so it's good to be you, right? We've got 10 more slices of time to cover. We're 2/3 of the way there. Now, if you feel so inclined, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell. We appreciate your support. We've got more great content we're putting together for you, and we want you to be the first to know. As we continue, day 21 involved finishing up the Dorian mode forms, completing all 12 keys, and then I went on to practice some of my original songs for an upcoming concert I have. This turned out to be a late night. I technically finished at 1 a.m., so my phone coded the video I captured as the next day. So when I went back to retrieve the vids, it took me a few minutes to figure out why I had 2 on one day. But technically, since I hadn't gone to sleep yet the night before, I was still on track. Side note, the show I played was packed, and I played incredibly well. My daughter, who sang harmonies with me, got a standing ovation. Day 21 takeaway: unless you're a night owl, don't try to practice after midnight. On day 22, I was once again on location at the school, where I played all descending octaves in all keys. Music doesn't just go up, right? This was very relevant to my development. I also began the process of playing all the caged chords without the capo up and down the neck, like this. By the way, if you want to go deeper with the caged system, I encourage you to check out this video where I use multicolored tape to label the frets for easy understanding. Also on day 22, I had a conversation with my daughter about Stevie Wonder, since we had learned and played Don't You Worry About a Thing for a song challenge I put together for the members of Guitar Success for You. She loves Stevie Wonder's music, but she was absolutely blown away to discover that he has been blind ever since he was a baby. What a masterful musician, especially given that fact. Takeaway from day 22, if you have the gift of sight, be grateful. On day 23, I continued playing all the caged chords up and down the neck without a capo. This vid captures me playing the Gedka permutation in the key of A flat. You don't have to understand what I just said, but if you do, that's awesome too. Then I began playing all the forms of the Phrygian mode based on the 3rd degree of the major scale. Again, I was playing the same notes, but with different tonal centers. This is significant. Day 23 takeaway, listen closely for the unique note found in each mode. Day 24 included more Phrygian mode forms, ascending and descending. I made good progress, but I still had a few more keys to play in. This continued with day 25 as I played even more Phrygian mode forms. As I continued to put the work into this project, I knew that my family was cheering me on. It meant taking some time away from them to get this done, but they were super supportive. Days 24 and 25 takeaway, make sure you have people in your life who believe in what you're doing. Day 26 involved playing the rest of the Phrygian mode forms to complete all 12 keys, and then I started the Lydian mode forms based on the 4th degree. But frankly, it was a shorter day. I ran out of time. I only practiced 15 minutes, but I knew I had to make it up the next day if I was going to keep pace. Even my youngest daughter asked me if I had practiced because I had only been in my office briefly. Day 26 takeaway, even a 15-minute practice session is worth it if that's what you can put in. For day 27, I tuned up in the blind, which again required my ears to be really attentive and also my hands to move all over the neck with fretted notes and harmonics, even reaching for the appropriate machine heads. Then I tackled the remaining Lydian mode forms and even started getting into the Mixolydian mode forms. I practiced 45 minutes today to catch up to my 15-minute shortfall from yesterday. Day 27 takeaway, stay on track with daily practice so you don't have to practice multiple hours to catch up. For day 28, I went back to the school one more time and practiced in the headmaster's old office. I finished the Mixolydian mode forms. I know it seems like a lot of scale work, but playing all these modes in all possible keys and positions has really helped me to feel the transitions between forms as well as scale position changes within the forms. My fretting hand is becoming more agile. Day 28 takeaway, scales can provide forward motion for any style of guitar playing. On day 29, I felt the self-imposed pressure of keeping my practice routine intact, but I also needed to rehearse my family in as a band for an upcoming worship set. So, I put on the blindfold and we rehearsed. From this vantage point, you can't see my family, but they're all playing instruments or singing. Wearing a blindfold made it harder for me to signal them non-verbally, which I also love to do, but it gave me a greater sense of confidence in my memorization, which really frees me up artistically. This would have been a little weird to do at a church worship rehearsal, but it was much more understandable by my family, who was only too happy to humor me, especially with the finish line in sight. And side note, the worship service went very smoothly with the music that Sunday. Clean playing, memorized songs, no distractions. Takeaway from day 29? Unless you're playing for 30 days straight, consider taking weekends off sometimes. On day 30, I buckled down and played all 12 forms of the Locrian mode, which was no small task, especially given the unstable sonic nature of this relatively unused mode, at least in more mainstream music circles. And although you might be thinking, what are you, glutton for punishment? Almost nobody uses the Locrian mode. You'd be right in a way, but what this allowed me to do was to complete the picture. I had now played all 7 of the modes in all 12 keys, starting on each diatonic scale degree, and I had played them ascending and descending in all 5 forms in all possible positions. Having this command of the fretboard will lead to better intuition when it comes to playing melodies, not to mention stronger fingers. Day 30 takeaway? Although we may not always finish what we start, it feels really gratifying when we do complete a project. Well, as you can see, I certainly look different at the end of the 30 days, but now my hands, mind, and especially my ears are more developed as a result of this experiment. Taking the visual element out of the equation was truly fascinating. I welcome your questions and comments because I'm hoping my work in documenting this 30-day challenge was helpful to you as you think about ways to enhance your guitar playing. Maybe share this video with someone you know. It just might intrigue them. Am I glad I did it? I sure am. Would I do it again? Very likely. I now see more than ever the value of having visual independence from my instrument. This will allow my presentation to be more interesting and engaging to the people I serve, whether in worship or performance, but it will also allow me to be more aware of my surroundings and of my collaborators, because I'm much more visually independent. As you know, your work to develop your skills doesn't just bless you. It blesses everyone you encounter, musicians and non-musicians. Now, if you want to brush up on some rhythm without even having to play chords, we've currently got 2 strumming workouts on our channel that we invite you to check out. Thanks for watching today's video, and I'll see you in the next one.